Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets get the bounce-back win that they need at home over the Philadelphia 76ers, and one Lonnie Walker, the fourth, leads the way. We break down the game action coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there, you'll find Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And Doug, as we dive into the 112-107 victory at home on the heels of what we defined as and is the worst loss of the season for Brooklyn, nice to see this team show some fight, show some bounce back, and ultimately a game that did come down to closing sequences, find a way to get across the line against a depleted, albeit still talented roster in Philadelphia.
Yeah, look, we said that this was going to be sort of the yo-yo up and down version of the Nets over the course of the rest of the season. Didn't think they would lose every single game, even though that Memphis game was super deflating coming out of it. But we also kind of recognize that, like, sometimes, you know, the NBA, that you can just bounce back. They weren't going to go 0-21 or whatever over the rest of the season. Though I will say my resolve on that was tested in the first quarter, where I started thinking,
down,
you know, where I started thinking, you know, I made this claim that they could, you know, bounce back into some of these games, and then I watched this first quarter against a Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid-less Philadelphia 76ers and thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe they will just kind of this will be sort of the way they skate into the sunset on the season. No, but they're able to buckle down in the second quarter. They're able to get a really pretty big important minutes from Lonnie Walker that got him back in. Dennis Schröder ends up helping like sort of close it out. But ultimately, look, they have to win every possible game from here on out, and they're still in the same position they were against Atlanta, but this is just the kind of thing we're rooting for over the course of the season. Can they close these games out? Tonight they did.
Yep, and that's all. It's all that ultimately matters, and trying to find different players and surprising players that can get the job done. You mentioned Lonnie Walker. We're going to go through some of the key sequences, but when you think about a game where ultimately Cam Johnson leaves with an injury, you already didn't have Day'Ron Sharpe coming into this game. You already know no Cam Thomas, no Ben Simmons, right? So you're getting thinner and thinner, and you are on the back-to-back, which frankly is already a doom and gloom scenario for the Brooklyn Nets, because we've seen them lose games against teams when the other team was on the back-to-back, and somehow the Nets looked like they were coming out flat. So you had to have some reservations. Kevin Ollie goes a little bit into the rotation here to get some saving minutes along the way. But Lonnie Walker, as you highlighted, he comes off the bench here, gives you 30 minutes, substantial for the bench unit, obviously. 7 of 14 from the field, 4 of 6 from beyond the arc, throws in 4 assists as well. 19 points, and listen, when the plus-minus matters, it matters. Plus 29 in this game. And there was a stretch, as was pointed out by the broadcast with Sarah Kustok and Ryan Rucco. It was like when he went off the court, it became a problem. And when he came back on the court, that's when they were able to surge. I think it just speaks to the fact that he is that just versatile enough of a player that can score in a couple of different ways, and it makes him a real threat when the ball's in his hands, certainly against this team in Philly that had, again, missing components that would have made this look a little bit different for Brooklyn.
Yeah, a team that really doesn't have that many live on-ball threats. Like, he is one of them. And though he's not really like an offensive facilitator in the sense that he's not going to sort of coordinate an offense, right? Like, that's not his job. But in terms of just like live bounce, burst off the dribble, get to the hole, beat other like slower defenders, of which like there are a few here where he was able to sort of size up on the switch. Guys like, you know, Tobias Harris, even Kyle Lowry at times. These guys that actually just can't stay in front of him. The Sixers have a decent amount of those guys, especially in this iteration of them. And he was able to take advantage. The 19 points, I mean, it doesn't look like a huge number, but they were critical in getting the team back into the game. Like, that was the key part. Like, his minutes ended up being, you know, you mentioned
a bucket, get a bucket, right?
Totally, totally. Like that second quarter stretch obviously starts the second half when Cam Johnson isn't able to come back. The plus 29, he takes over the best plus minus on the team for this year. It had been Day'Ron Sharpe. It's now easily it's easily Lonnie Walker the fourth on the season for the Nets. He's just, some of that's, playing bench minutes going against second units, but it's also a testament to how good he's been and really how important he's been really since the beginning of the season, sometimes only with the injury standing in his way on staying on the court long enough to like really have long impacts, because he has dealt with like little tweaks along the way. But no, really, really important game. We joke about only using plus minus when it helps us and helps the point we're trying to make, either positive or negative. But this was one of those ones where the plus minus like tracks along with what you were seeing in the game. That pairing of him and Dennis Smith Jr. between the defense and offense got them back into stuff. They really needed the energy pickup with that group, like to make hay, because it was really a struggle for the starters. And he just helped lead that charge, because then what he does, the energy lift that he gives with the scoring in his minutes kind of like, I think, buoyed the rest of the team into being like, okay, hey, we can win this game. Right. I think that like that was a clear 1-to-1 effect for what Lonnie Walker did, specifically, like I would say in the second quarter.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that you need from this team. We said it before, and they don't have the elite talent. So at some point, you need to be able to turn to someone else. And it is a galvanizing effect there, too, especially when Johnson goes down. He's been playing better basketball the last couple of games. Mikal Bridges dealing with the wrist injury. So I think you're kind of anticipating that it's going to need to come from somebody else here. And on top of which, you're also realizing, as we'll discuss coming up here in one moment, that with no Day'Ron Sharpe and already with no Ben Simmons, this rebounding battle thing becomes a bit more of a journey. And there were key players beyond Nicholas Claxton that contributed to that. But I think in games like these, when the Nets have already shown a propensity to be willing to go to small ball lineups, you go, we're going to small ball lineups, but they need to be productive, right? It needs to be offensively productive first and foremost, because we've seen the games where it doesn't get across the line on the offensive end, and all of a sudden you're kind of left looking around. And a team that's had a hard time adjusting themselves to a different strategy, it's really critical to have Lonnie come into this game and go, yep, I'm going to give you some consistent points. I'm going to be the spark, and take away that need to go to something different that I don't think Kevin Ollie and the Nets are really prepared to do just yet at this point, right?
Well, or they run into sometimes these small ball lineups, I mean, not even at the 5, like at the guard spot too. They've run into these problems with Lonnie Walker before. Not necessarily his fault, but when it's like a Lonnie Walker plus Cam Thomas plus Dennis Smith Jr., like things like that, or like Dennis Schröder plus Lonnie Walker plus like another small guard. Those are the problems. Those are the times where it's just, you're not actually getting enough on offense for what you're giving away on defense. And they've done that. They have done that a lot this season. Now it's a little less now. Cam's out of the mix. This is not an anti-Cam thing. It's just like he's a smaller guard. So sometimes it's tougher to pair with the rest of that rotation. But they were able to sort of like, because they went those two small guards, but then it was Claxton plus like Jalen Wilson, like Watford gets in there, Bates Diop plays minutes. They went bigger on the rest of the group to make up for what they were probably giving away at the point of attack. And that's important for Lonnie Walker, because like he's not going to really get after it defensively. And it's mostly when they just go too small across the board in the backcourt that they give away too much. So getting those rotations right, getting the right mixing and matching with him, getting him to take advantage of just, advantageous switches, which the Sixers were giving up at a pretty healthy clip, especially once Bamba was off the court. And this is sort of like how you're able to get yourself back into the game. So really nice game from Lonnie Walker. The Nets need guys they need this stuff from as many guys as possible that can just kind of punch above their weight. And that's probably going to be the theme for the rest of the season. They're just going to need standout performances from role players, just because that's sort of how the team is built at this point.
Coming up here in a second, some high-level stats, and then other players that maybe contributed to a little bit of chippiness that actually got this team fired up against Philly. Kyle Lowry, take that. We'll dive into it in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy. It's also what keeps you in your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle, level it up to peak performance, superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP. Bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
All right, so as we continue the post-game podcast episode, the Brooklyn Nets victors 112-107 at home over the Philadelphia 76ers. We remind you, head over to WeGotNets.com, sign up for that free ebook, 5 stories in 5 days, all about some of the biggest moments in Nets history. 100% free when you sign up with your email, and opportunities to reach out to us. Tell us and yourself the next story that you want to hear about the Brooklyn Nets. WeGotNets.com, free ebook. Sign up today. Okay, so just quickly at a high level, we talked about this yesterday where some games, the box score tells you everything. Other days, it can tell you a different story. If you went over and looked at this box score, you'd say, well, the Nets, they were even from the field, but they narrowly lost the three-point shooting. Philadelphia was almost 43% from beyond the arc. They lost the free throw shooting at the line, 79% for the Philadelphia 76ers. Yes, they won the rebounding battle, but they lost the turnover battle by a narrow margin. They lost, they lost the what was the other one there? Oh, just lead margins, excuse me. They had that 14-point deficit they came back from, did lead by 7 at one point. But points in the paint, plus 10 there, right? Rebounding battle, found a way to get that win there. Some of these stats would tell you, when you look at all the guys that weren't available, even for both sides, you go, oh, well, the Nets don't have the ability to come back and get. They don't have the ability to win games like these. They need to win every key margin category. So from that standpoint, I do look at Nicholas Claxton, gets the double-digit rebounds, like we said he needed to from a game prior. And I know I mentioned it tongue-in-cheek. I think Schröder is the kind of player that you probably don't love when you play against him. Love him when he's on your team. I think Dennis Smith Jr. has a little bit in him too. Willing to get a little bit chippy and get into a couple of little scrums throughout this game that you probably need for a team as under 500 as the Nets are, and they have this pendulum swinging game-to-game results. Maybe we just got to kind of piss ourselves off by pissing off the other team for some stretches of these games.
Yeah, Schröder had the when he had that lefty finish at the end to kind of basically close the game out, right? Like that was the pretty much the key sequence. When he was slapping at his hand, I was thinking, man, if I was a Sixer fan, that would drive me nuts. I was just like, it just seemed cool. It just seems weird. I don't know. I was watching it. I'm happy to have him do it. Like I don't really care. These guys can.
And it was also the thing with Lowry where it was like Lowry bowls him over, and Lowry's a smaller guy, but he's thick, right? So he bowls over Schröder. He's acknowledging that it is. He's like, yeah, that's a foul. It's a foul. And Schroeder's like, hey, that's a foul. And they just start going. It's like they agree, but Schröder is insulted by the acknowledgement from Lowry. So it's these little.
Well, my thought on that is probably a lifetime spent playing against Kyle Lowry, and you just like you don't get the benefit of the doubt at that point, right? He's like the guy drives you totally crazy, and so at that point it's like, hey, we played so many minutes against each other. They've both been in the league forever. Like we played both in the Eastern Conference basically forever too. So it's like, we played together against each other for so long. I don't know. I just like. We have examples of this in other spots.
Can I tell you a funny thing? Because you mentioned that about played against each other so many times. When I looked this up during the game, because Dennis Schröder does end up finishing this one with a 20-point performance. He goes ahead and gives you 7 of 12 from the field, 1 of 3 from deep, 5 of 7 at the line, 8 assists. We've been highlighting how he really has been a quality facilitator, especially in the absence of Ben Simmons for that role. But I went over and looked it up. Most 20-point plus game performances on the current active Nets roster. Dennis Schröder has 181 games scoring over 20 points. He averages 24 when he's over 20 points. He's averaging 33 minutes a game, 4,300 points. The next closest player is Mikal Bridges with 113 games like that. And then wouldn't you know it? Who do you think is the third highest 20-point performer games in their career active on the Nets current roster?
That played tonight?
That did not play tonight in totality.
Oh, all right. I mean, it was probably Cam Thomas.
No, it's Ben Simmons with 71, but Cam Thomas is fourth. Yeah, I know. But because again, you have to really massage your brain to get Ben Simmons to 20-point games. But
but you don't. I mean, the thing is, you kind of forget with Schröder too. These guys have pretty long careers. Schröder's he's been around forever. He was a lead guard in those Atlanta teams. I mean, he's so many years ago. So it's just not surprising. Yeah, I'm not that surprised by it just because. I don't know, NBA life is long for some of these guys. But in terms of Schröder, just to kind of dial it back here 1 second, with him or Schröder, I always say Schröder, but I know it's Schröder. With him, he has the first half for him was rough, right? Especially the first quarter was really, really bad. But he continues to really be, for all of his flaws, which I think there are some, right? It's for sure not a perfect game. But he still continues to be the point guard organizer that the team needs. And they've really needed it. again, even for the times it's bad, they don't really have anyone else like him on the roster right now. They have no other guy that I would even label a ball first point guard. And one, it's a reason you see his minutes really high. Two, it's like even when he has rough first quarters, they just basically have to play him almost the whole game because at some point, you can see how discombobulated things become when he's not out there. They just really don't have anyone to kind of run anything that's not just like sort of me first switching actions. And so I think we're just going to continue to see his minutes just be really high. Probably have to live with the times where like some of these rainbow, like weirdly heat check threes go up into the air and just be like, and just kind of be okay with it because the rest of it has been pretty good. And it's especially good considering after him, they don't have anybody else that can even come close to what he does.
Well, think about it too, right? I mean, these are two different players, but this is the exact same way that we talked about Spencer Dinwiddie when he was on this team. Listen, there's going to be some times when he gets a little trigger happy offensively and he wants to get his looks. And again, I think these guys are built differently. I think Schröder is better serving in a pure facilitator role first, right? But
clarify here, Spencer Dinwiddie last year, not this year. Spencer Dinwiddie didn't do any of this year.
No. And that's actually to my point, right? Like, why do you end up trading out Spencer Dinwiddie and getting back Schröder? Because you're looking at Spencer Dinwiddie and say, we just need you to do what you did last year. Like, that's still what we need from you. And for every number of reasons, Spencer Dinwiddie did not want to provide that role for this team. So you're left with this devoid. Right. So you go get a player that, as you mentioned, has flaws in his game, but you see, yep, that's exactly what we need here at times. Just somebody that can lean into that role and be willing to try to help activate some other players. And he did that again tonight, and it ended up serving really as a facilitator and as a scorer. When we talk about getting to the line, he's the only player. Nobody else. I mean, Claxton ends up getting there. It's him, Bridges, and Claxton that get to the line 5, 6, and 7 times a piece, respectively. But you don't have other guys that are getting downhill, especially without Cam Thomas as well. So when you talk about turning the corner, being able to get the basket a little bit, those things really matter, and Schröder steps up in a big way. Without him, without Lonnie Walker, I think this game looks really different, especially with Mikal Bridges laboring with his wrist injury.
Yeah, and is it even a wrist injury? I mean, like, I guess we could just...
I don't know. Probably a full body injury for him at this point with the amount of games he plays.
Yeah, maybe, because, like, you know, I know that he came out with a wrist, you know, he wasn't on the injury report at all, and I would call it a wrist injury if like this game was different for Bridges than it's been over the, you know, last couple of weeks. This is like this is basically what it's been for him, right? Like he had the 38-point game, but these 15 points that he had in this game, remember, is like not that different from what he's been doing outside of that 38-point game. 15, 14, 15, 4, 11, 15. I mean, those are the last 7 games. So maybe this just is kind of what he's becoming. I can't put the wrist injury on it when it's been like this long before that. And it's also a testament to why they've really needed these other guys to step up in such a big way, like Lonnie Walker, Dennis Schröder. DFS had a huge game. We'll talk about him here in a little bit too, but these guys had to be able to step up. And it's so funny because the Nets need every ounce of what these other guys can give just to be able to scrape out wins over no Tyrese Maxey, no Joel Embiid, the Sixers teams, right? That's just where they are with talent. And no one likes to tell you that the team has no talent like Nets coaches, because Jacques Vaughn did it earlier in the season and Kevin Ollie did it last game against Memphis. He's like, we just don't have he goes, he had some, I'm going to paraphrase this, but he was like, you know, we didn't have a lot of intensity. We don't have the talent to do that. I'm like, man, these guys will just, they're the first guys to remind you the Nets don't have talent are the coaches. It's absolutely hilarious. Good, amazing self-preservation. Or strategy.
Guys, I would love to have the kind of talent that it could afford to make a single mistake in any given night, but that's not this squad.
It's great. I mean, I read the quote and I was like, awesome. It's just like they put you in this chair. And it's like you just can't wait to remind. All right, I want to talk a little DFS. I want to talk about a few other things. I want to tell you about a show we got coming up this week too. We'll get into that here in a second. First, let you know this segment is brought to us by our sponsor, BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest. Maybe it's a big thing. Maybe it's a small thing. Sometimes those things can just start to build up. It's important that you let it out, especially to someone who's unbiased in your life. That's the key. Someone who can just listen, who doesn't have all the background that they need about you, but can listen and kind of just help you along the way. Today, want to tell people about how you really feel about something. Maybe just thinking about things you want to improve on this week. big, small, whatever it is. This is where therapy can step in. Therapy can be different for everyone. Sometimes it's the bigger problems, sometimes the smaller ones. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible, suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. You're going to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. 10% off that first month. BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA.
All right, so as we tie a bow on the 112-107 victory for the Brooklyn Nets, winning at home over the 76ers, getting that darn job done, we do remind ourselves about the other players that were here. We're going to get to Dorian Finney-Smith. I just want to give a quick nod to Nicholas Claxton. We talk about 33 minutes, especially with no Day'Ron Sharpe. You're going to need him to play bigger minutes in a game like this. 6 of 8, 10 rebounds, all of it now is becoming somewhat humorous to me because all of the chippiness and all those plays are now, they're expected. If I
He had another one tonight. Yeah, he had another one tonight. I was like, he wants a tee. He wants a technical. This is great.
Like,
he just wants a tech.
I eat these things for breakfast. If I don't, I sustain myself on technical fouls that I induce of my own accord. But to your point, when we talked in our last post game, the difference here is 4 blocks. The difference here is 10 rebounds. When you do the other things, then kind of wanting these technical fouls at some point, it's okay because you get the job done. So I want to make sure we give him his credit. But Dorian Finney-Smith, who we discussed and said, hey, he's been kind of quiet scoring. It goes back to the trade deadline. Why is this player on the roster? At least for one game, at least for tonight. He also came through 4 of 7 from deep, a 20-point performance, 8 rebounds, and had a couple of really nice defensive sequences late down this stretch to help the Nets get this win.
Yeah, I mean, he really struggled for a while. I mean, basically all February, 24% from 3 over the course of February, was 26% in January. Like, he had really just hadn't really made anything, right? For a guy that's supposed to be a 3-and-D wing, the 3 was completely gone. And when that goes, still defensively, they still need him. I mean, the way the team is made up, like, it's still important for him to be there. I think teams still probably are still trying to close him out at least. Like, I think that he's at least had a long enough career of making threes that teams aren't just going to, I mean, short of what the Rockets did to him earlier in the year, where they just like, hey, you can shoot, go ahead, boss. And everyone else can do whatever, but like, you can just shoot. Teams are still closing him out and stuff. And over, at least in the short term, he is making them pay, right? He's 44% over the last 3 games from 3. And that's critical for the Nets' really chances of survival. Like, if he's going to play 31, 37, 35 minutes, he's got to knock down, 3 threes a game, something like that, right? 2.5 threes a game, at least, right? Just to keep everyone honest. So good to see him sort of getting back on the right track over these last few games. It's something that's been sorely missed, and it's not the only reason they've lost games, clearly, but they're a team that, again, they like, their margin for error is so small at this point that guys like Dorian Finney-Smith shooting really bad for 2 months, like, kind of does matter. Yeah. It does matter for sort of just how the team is put together and how they want to just basically attack. So good to see that at least coming back around. Hopefully it sticks. I think we're going to continue to see higher minutes for him, especially if Day'Ron is out. You play small ball 5 at the center and kind of like pair him with, the Watfords of the world to try to just get big enough across the back line. Surprised we didn't see Noah Clowney here at all, by the way. But I've
been surprised
overall.
Yeah.
What's that? Sorry.
No, I just been surprised about Clowney. Like, I ever since the trade deadline, ever since you fired Jacques Vaughn, it's just like, hey, come on.
Today at least they called. I mean, he was there. Like, they actually they brought him from the G League, so he was actually at least on the bench. Right. I actually thought that was a sign that we would see him, but it was Bates Diop that ends up getting those backup 5 minutes. That was a little surprising to me, but overall, back to just DFS. Again, him being aggressive with the ball, because he did actually attack a couple closeouts also, and that's just important. Like, the Nets are going to need to have that happen a few times a game.
He, by the way, without, you take him away, you take Lonnie Walker away, this team would have shot 4 of 17 from beyond the arc. Those 2 players alone combined for 8 of 13 from deep. So when you talk about looking at this roster, you talk about a game like this, if not for, you can look at any one of these guys. If not for Lonnie Walker being as efficient as he was in his minutes, this game is a loss. If not for Dorian Finney-Smith stepping up for a 20-point, like, you should never have to, in normal circumstances, say, Dorian Finney-Smith, We just need 20 really efficient points from you tonight, right? Like it should be thanks so much for the 12 and 6-7 rebounds and a couple and really good defensive sequences. So every one of these guys ends up contributing to it. Little bit of housekeeping here that we can talk about before we highlight what Doug is going to be having coming up on tomorrow's episode of the Locked On Nets podcast. I think you just winked at me, by the way, if you're watching on YouTube. The New York Knicks.
No, it's something in my eye. Yeah.
No, it's fine. You winked. We all know it. The New York Knicks. This is what you say, not doing your crosstown, friends a favor here. They lost to the stupid Atlanta Hawks, 116-100. And this is the kind of thing where when you combine it with that Grizzlies loss for the Brooklyn Nets, you say, yes, you got those back-to-back wins. But remember, Atlanta came into those games against Brooklyn, having beaten Orlando, having beaten Utah at home. So they came on the road, lost those games. They get right back to winning ways. While they do have Cleveland coming up, it's like they've already done the thing. We're talking about it the same way. Well, they're trying to hold off the Brooklyn Nets. Yeah, they'll play Cleveland. Tough game, might be a loss, but then they get the Memphis Grizzlies. So as we walk our way through this schedule, it's good to bounce back, good for Brooklyn to get the win, but we're going to keep going back to that Memphis game and having this taste in our mouths of like son of a gun when you wanted to get it to 1.5 games back and really keep pressure mounting on Atlanta. You went the opposite way. You gave a full game back to them in your very next performance with both your teams on the schedule.
Yeah, in like another world, I would be like, oh, lucky Hawks because they get the Knicks without Brunson tonight, and the Knicks are just kind of been decimated by injuries. But the Nets lost. We lost the ability to do that when the Nets lose to the Grizzlies team that they lost to last night. Yeah. Like for the rest of the year, the Nets can't make a single complaint. No one can complain a single thing about unlucky or lucky. I mean, again, they just played the Sixers without Maxey. And I mean, Embiid's already been out, but like to lose Maxey because of the concussion, sort of like an hour or so before the game, hour and a half before the game, like the Nets have actually had some luck along those lines too. And you wouldn't know it from the record.
Yeah.
Like, so anyway, the Hawks, yeah, they get the win over the Knicks and the Nets. I still, it's just going to be such a struggle uphill here. That 2.5 games seems really enormous to me. Just like knowing what this Nets team is like on a night-to-night basis, 2.5 games, 3 games, even if it was 2 games, owning the tiebreaker, I'm like, man, it's so hard to see it. And this is even after a win. It's just so hard to see it. Everything's a struggle. The games, not even every game. Games are close when you feel like they shouldn't be. Right, like they just have trouble. Sort of the pulling away from teams is tough. I think it was just going to be our kind of talking point for the rest of the season. Is that like, I think they're just going to be struggling to get up and over that hump. We'll see. I hope not. Like I want them to get there. It'd be nice to have a playing game under our belt here, but overall, I think this is going to be pretty tough over the course of the rest of this.
And even in the short term, Atlanta will have Cleveland, Memphis, New Orleans, Portland, Utah, LA. Both teams, LA, Clippers and Lakers, and then the Phoenix Suns. That's their next 8 games. So you can look at that and you can run the tally and say, hey, that could feel like a 3-5 kind of run here, depending on how things shake out. But it comes back to what Doug mentions. There's no confidence in the Brooklyn Nets on a night-to-night basis. And really, it's like, the funny thing for me too, not to end on a down note, but it's like I can go back and look. I can look at tonight's game and I can look at the Memphis game. And I really think that you can kind of paint. It's like, yeah, well, if Dorian Finney-Smith was hitting some shots early in the Memphis game, maybe it feels like it goes a little bit different. Or if Lonnie Walker, right, if one of these pieces, as Mikal Bridges struggles, as Cam Johnson goes out, I don't know if any game is ever going to really feel like, yeah, that's one that they really had in the bag, right? Like the game scripts are always going to feel like they hang on whether or not a couple of key role players throw in just enough. And if the starters keep holding up their end of the bargain, something that we've seen some struggles from Mikal Bridges. So road ahead, as we know, Detroit, Charlotte, Cleveland, Orlando, the Pacers, San Antonio, and the Pelicans for the Nets. So you're just trying to bounce back here. If you think 3-5 for Atlanta, try to go 500. It means you gain on them. That's the kind of game you're playing. And I think ultimately we're going to keep talking about how the Nets run out of road as the season winds down to try to close that gap.
All right, we're going to hang around here on YouTube for a little bit. Got a bunch of people in here. If you have questions or comments, make sure you throw them at Locked On Nets. We got Nets.com coming up tomorrow. Also, special guest, one Mr. Bob Windrum from Nets Daily. You might know him as running Nets Daily or over on Twitter at Nets Daily. Net Income is what he's known there. We sat down for about an hour. He was really gracious to come on to the show. Really excited about that. So go make sure you check that one out. That's tomorrow's episode. It'll be Thursday's episode with Bob Windrum from Nets Daily. So go make sure you check that one out.
I do believe in the old saying, what does not kill us makes us stronger. Our experiences, good and bad, make us who we are. By overcoming difficulties, we gain strength and maturity. Why, that's Angie Jolie.
Oh man, one of the all-time great poets.
That's
We'll be
right.
back again tomorrow in a moment on YouTube talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball, 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 basketball. Yeah. Tomb Raider basketball. Yeah. Ah, yes, my friends. When the post-game podcast ends, the post-podcast begins with you, the fans, talking about the most recent game and anything on your mind. Shout out at Locked On Nets. If you have a question, comment, or frankly, a curiosity, Doug's already fired up a few here, so we'll dive right in. And thank you for being a part of the YouTube lives, obviously, as we always say. Hey, at Locked On Nets, Doug, this is directly for you. You
Yeah.
came up with the team name Nets.
Yep.
Was that your first choice? Yeah,
No.
go take us through the infancy of developing this franchise.
The first choice was Rims.
Yep.
But then it was gonna be the New Jersey Rims.
Mhm.
But then it didn't have like the phonetic ring to it. So we went one step down on the gear and we went Nets. So
Yeah, that
that's
makes
it.
sense.
That's if it had been like I'll tell you right now, if it had been Rhode Island, it's Rhode Island Rims. Because
Right,
it's
makes
the
sense,
R
yeah.
and the R thing, but because they were in the swamps of New Jersey, it's New Jersey Nets. So there you go. That's
we had that conversation. I remember when they were moving to Brooklyn. I said maybe backboard, Brooklyn backboards. But then you're moving back up the chain, and it was a whole thing. So we stuck with Nets, and we live with it.
Yeah, they should have. You know, that good call. They should have changed that. Like the Brooklyn backboards. I mean, any team that named themselves over a piece of equipment is just so hilarious. It's actually super underrated. That like this was that like they're like it's like naming yourself the New Jersey Balls. Right?
What I say was, you moved to Brooklyn. You go, what's your name? The Brooklyn Basketballs. What do you guys do? You can piece it together.
Like, nah, that's two on the nose. That's two on the nose. What's the next? There's only 3 pieces of equipment. So like,
we're limited here. We don't have a ton of options. American cheese. What is up, man? I love you and your Kraft single packets. We are not making the play-in. Well, I mean, it's certainly a more than likely opportunity that we're not going to make the play-in, but there's still a chance they could make the play-in. I had somebody tell me, I said this over on Twitter. I said, hey, the only way for the Nets to get the fan base back on board is to rattle off 3 wins against Philly starting tonight, against Detroit, against the Hornets. And someone replied with, the only way I'm getting back on board is they rattle off 10 straight. And I was like, well, okay, can we live in some level of reality here? Like, I mean, this team at one point went 27-20. Like,
I take it back. Not even next season. We'll see you in 25-26. Like, and maybe that 10-game winning streak. That's tough to do. I mean, I wonder how many teams have even had a 10-game winning streak this year. It's probably like 4. I mean, maybe not even that many.
Some of the most elite teams can't put together 10-game winning streaks.
I mean, for sure, Boston has. I think LA, the Clippers might have. I doubt. I bet you. I doubt even Denver has this year. 42-19.
They were kind of funked around early on. We're coming and going with some of their games. That being the case, American cheese, never give up on us, but go put yourself on a piece of toast and melt. All right, here we go. Lecky coming in with, I always think about the Bucks series in 2021, the heartbreaking moment. This is also...
Do you?
Yeah. Do you? Does it stick with you? You got to let it go. I think that time is gone. And by the way, I think, not you, Lecky, but some of the most embroiled fans that are the most irate with the franchise right now are the ones that are saying, because we were right there against the Bucks, it should have been us. We should have won a champion. Like, yes, but you didn't. And it's over now. And
well,
now
the only reason I don't do it now is because I did it for like a year and a half straight. So like I just ran out.
By the way, be on board. You can go back and watch the episodes. We referenced it for a while because it did sting. But I think you agree. Like at some point, I don't know. Maybe this is like a fan thing. Like I guess it is always remember that moment when we could have, right? Like,
yeah, of course. That's all sports. That's literally the definition of sports. Sports is because only one team wins every year. You are doomed to remember all the losses, your last loss of the year. It's just like, it's literally how it works for every team. And so that's the algebra of sports, really. It's unfortunate.
And for me, I think like, at least with that iteration of the team, and this has been true for the Nets in recent years, but a little bit is that because that was such a short-lived era in reality, it's not like, you came so close and then you came back the next year and the next year. Like I think about the Buffalo Bills in the NFL when they were going to every AFC championship game and coming up just short and then going to Super Bowls, going 4 times, never winning. Like when you have those type of runs, then I think a part of your core identity as a fan becomes how close you came. The Bucks series,
Yeah.
remember, you still have a long way to go. While you could, if you cast my mind back, I'd say foregone conclusion, the Nets were going to win that championship. They were so good offensively, it would have been brilliant. But there's no guarantee that that was going to be the outcome that year.
No,
So I
they
think,
still had to go
you
through the
needed
I mean,
more.
the Hawks are still there, and they probably would have beat them, but it for sure would not. For sure wasn't like they locked it up. It's easy to think that, but it's not reality. I don't think. I think they would have been favorites, but yeah.
No, it's all good. We can keep going down that road. Maybe Lecky has stirred something back up in us. Thanks for entertaining that. Sure. What did you ask us? Did I already give? Did I put up one of your?
No, that was the naming. What the naming?
Oh, good. Oh, that was a good question then, man. Frequent flyer. I apologize for not calling you out as the thing that you are, a frequent flyer on the podcast. Here we go, Johnny. You're also a frequent flyer. Sometimes you come in a little sideways on us. How realistic is it that the Brooklyn Nets just makes executive decision and parts ways with Simmons this summer? He's not healthy for their timeline, and it crushed this team this season. I'll frame this in a way that I'll be curious if you would get on board with. That at some point we both agree, and we have agreed, he has no value. You're not trading him, and the Nets do not have an appetite to attach assets to get rid of him. Do you think there's any world where the Nets make the choice of like, you can just get paid and stay away? Because I do have this concern about trying to construct your roster, because you're always going to account for him if he can be healthy and contribute, but you can never count on him to be healthy to contribute.
I'm going to save this because Bob and I talk about this tomorrow on tomorrow's episode. And he had some actually what I thought to be interesting thoughts. I will say, and it's near the end of the episode, so if you got to stick around until all the way to the end, I will say that this is probably of a timeline that's been really negative. This time right now is like easily the most negative Simmons rhetoric we've heard. I think between what the agent said. I mean, the agent's words, Bernie Lee's words were like, oh, man, it was like I failed him and stuff like that. And there might be disagreements about what he needs. We might be headed. Maybe I'm just saying it all now. But I think real quick about the comment here. Mm-hmm. There's no way they can functionally within the vines of the contract part ways with him. Like they're stuck up. They can't it's not the NFL. You can't just waive guys, right? Like they're paying this guy all the way through. I know Adam did not say this. I'm commenting here to Jonathan. I think that it's on the table that he has like some other surgery and like that sits him out for again, and whatever. But I think the part where like they just send them home, I find that to be, I don't think they would do that, but I think it would also mostly be because it would look like abandoning him or something like that. Like, you know what I mean? I think that, but I posed to Bob, he's got 100 games left on his contract. Like, how many do you think he plays?
Right.
I mean, so go ahead and listen to tomorrow's episode. We talk about this for, a decent part of one segment where we talk about the Simmons problem, and it's a big problem. I mean, there's no way around it. And I think this is getting close to like, some of the stuff that's come out with him over the last couple of days is like, man, this is not great. So I don't know. Anyway, I don't know if it's
to clarify, if anyone doesn't know, like it's Doug and Bob having the conversation. I'm not on that episode, so I'm sure we'll probably end up. But I know we will as the season comes down to an end, and as we get more updates around Ben Simmons, we'll rehab these conversations. But it's just interesting to me, and I brought this up a few episodes ago, just that idea of like, especially down the back end of this season, this was when Simmons was still healthy, that you needed to treat him just as a player. And when somebody asked about him, I know very clear, he has injuries. Like you cannot avoid that. And there's no reason why there should be this negativity associated with him beyond the fact that it's frustrating that he can't be healthy to contribute. But if you're the Nets, you just have to think of him as a role player on the bench that may be a part of it, because once you start to keep him in your core function, then I think you have those big stretches where the team looks a mess, because you know how impactful he can be when he's on the court for them. We'll grab another couple here. We've got Ian Cart. What do you put in that cart? No, that's fine. Hey guys, what's the story with Bridges not wanting to be a part of the huddle versus the Grizzlies, not putting his hand in? Oh yeah, I saw something about this over on social. I'm gonna nip this in the bud. It's nothing. Like the fact that it gets caught on, it's nothing. Guys come in and out of huddles. Sometimes guys are fully there. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're getting a water. Sometimes they're wiping a towel. I think that this is the kind of thing that you grab onto when a team has had a really bad year and there's been a lot of frustrations around it, but I wouldn't read anything into that.
Agreed. It was a nothing thing. It was just like a mistiming of guys getting up out of the huddle and going back onto the court. And they were going back on the court before they realized Ali was doing something. So I think it's a nothing.
Other than that, I don't see anything else, at least right now. I'll scan through to see if there's any other comments or anything. Obviously, we'll have the conversation that Doug has with Bob tomorrow, and then the post game will be Thursday. But I don't know, man. I'll be interested. I am curious about, you mentioned Clowney being up, and then what happens with Day'Ron Sharpe. I am always going to be frustrated if guys aren't playing. I had this frustration with Jalen Wilson, but then he started to get himself into the mix. I didn't look actually at his. What was his final box score tonight? Oh, 4 from 3. Yeah, the 3-point shooting's coming crashing down to earth. What a tragedy. So that's unfortunate for him. We expected it, but I while we talk about wanting this team obviously to pursue the playing game because that's what's in front of them, I also am I am willing to see that you lose some games because you play young players, because that's a part of what the back end of the season is too. So it's a delicate balance, but none of these veterans are more deserving of getting run here at the end of the year than anybody else.
I just think it was a bummer that Clowney, this would have been a spot to have him play, and he didn't play at all. So that was a little bit.
What contract would you offer him? Certainly don't let him walk for free. This is a bigger one too. We have actually, Al, probably an episode at some point coming up about this, because we said this in an episode. What's the guarantee that the Nets want to be here? Like that Claxton wants to be a part of the Nets going forward, that there isn't another opportunity for him somewhere else. Now, if they want him around, it's great. But that, again, ties right back into having Ben Simmons, unfortunately, because you know what it does to your rotations and your roster if you have 2 non-shooting players on it. So
that's a big topic of the off. This will probably be like the number one off-season topic. I mean, short of like the Nets making a trade, is like what to do with the Claxton situation. It's not totally clear to me what the right thing to do is, but yeah. Sorry, I don't know. I think that we'll curve that one to the end of the year.
Yeah. I just read Potty 66. Nice Nets win tonight, but realistically, waiting for the Nets the next kick in the nuts. Yeah,
it's always right around the corner.
It's coming. It's coming, buddy. I did say this the other day in that Memphis game. I was like, I think I was like, watching this Grizzlies game is like getting kicked repeatedly in the nuts by my nephew. And guess what? When my nephew kicks me in the nuts, he doesn't announce it ahead of time. He just comes flying out of a corner of a room somewhere, full steel-toed boot on, and that's what the Brooklyn Nets are probably going to do to you at some point. So,
yeah, tell you, man. We called it a yo-yo, but I guess you call it something else, tomato on that one. About just how to reference
a more painful version of a yo-yo. Sure. I don't know. I'm gonna check real quick here as I saw somebody shout us out just to see if this is worth going. Oh yeah, actually, this is something just to highlight. Lonnie Walker, realistically, you're signing with the Nets for an MLE or going to another team to scoop him up. This is one of the things we talk about. You have him on a 1 year. You have Dennis Smith Jr. on the 1 year. I think Lonnie Walker's obviously proven it. He's the guy right behind in terms of like playoff performances. He's pretty high on the list behind Dennis Schröder. He over even like 20-point games. He has more playoff credentials. So I think it'd be good to keep him around, but
he's gonna have a market.
State of flux.
And he's gonna have a market too that maybe he didn't have this offseason, right? So this is the other. Everyone always thinks guys are gonna stay. The grass. Sometimes this team has a lot of problems. Like the grass could be greener in some of these other spots for some of these guys, for sure.
And I'm not right on everything, but I did say as that deadline was approaching, I was like, Lonnie Walker's the kind of guy. By the way, he helped you get the win tonight, but maybe he should have been traded at the deadline to get value now, because there's going to be inevitably this offseason, we're going to talk about guys that just walk for quote nothing from the Nets, and fans are going to be upset about it, and and be really wringing their hands over it, and just prepare for it, because it's going to happen here for this team. I expect some significant turnover. I think that I'm good. Are you good?
Yeah, we'll get out of here. Okay, nice win over the Sixers tonight. Like I said, tune in tomorrow with Bob Windrum of Nets Daily. Nice long conversation about the Nets season, the season that's going on now, and what thoughts about the future, where we have some disagreements. So worth listening to that.
Do not judge me by my success. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again. Why, that is Nelly Mandela.
Who was it?
Nelson Mandela.
Oh, yeah, gotcha. R.I.P.
The closest ones call him Nelly.
Well, the Mandela effect would have you think this is an R.I.P. situation, but that was the whole thing. Like, they named it after. Is he still alive?
Let's stick
no, 2013. That's the whole thing was that Well, I got confused because the Mandela effect. It's like where
Yes.
the collective think that something happened. Everyone's like, he died in the 80s, but he did die in 2000.
I believe Bob Barker went through this cycle several times at the end of his career.
Well, the big one is like was Sinbad in a movie where he was a genie. That's the one. That's the big one where it's like, well, no, it's not. Okay, well, anyway, we went off the rails here. Anyway, one of the all-time great moments. All right, people, we'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball. Sinbad.